Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming to the graveyard session. I suspect the rest of the room will join you in half an hour when they finish their lengthy lunch. Please do sit at tables where other people are. Don't sit on your own. There is some group work and quite a lot of it that will take place during this session. And groups work better when there's more than one, surprisingly, even though we're British.
It's the best table, I can't leave it,
Nobody ever likes to sit at the front table, do they? But you can be a group on your own. I'm sure somebody will join. There's a gentleman coming down here, looks like he's going to join you. But okay, fabulous. You're not here to listen to me speak, so I'm going to be very, very quick and introduce a future best-selling author of a book called The Failures and Successes of a Learning... No, it's not that one.
That's the title of this session. Yeah.
Oh, that's the title of the session. He's got a book coming out. When it's out, it'll sell millions. Mr. Tom Boss.
So welcome everybody. I hope you can stay awake during my session. I'll do my best to have it turn out a bit of an engaging session. So my name is Tom. I've been working for a company called Skillstown for about 8 years now, and I'm going to be telling you today about my failures and successes on the road to finding great learner engagement. So, and especially about learner engagement, I chose that subject because it hit me quite early on that there's a lot of companies working in learning and development, a lot of people very active in learning and development, developing great tools, developing great platforms, and a lot of content. And I've seen... Are you good? Yeah? Yeah? Picks up every now and then. Otherwise, I'll just speak a bit louder. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'll step over here. Works fine as well. So yeah, welcome everybody. Just join any table if you want. Please, as Andy just mentioned, don't sit alone. It'd be nice to have a bit of a discussion. There's a great table here in front where you can join if you want to. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on in learning and development, but I saw on a very large scale, especially in the Netherlands, that engagement of learners is terribly low, and it leads to a lot of offering and a lot of overwhelming abilities to learn. And we're quite good at enabling learning, especially in the Netherlands, I guess, but not necessarily in engaging people. So that topic, got me very interested, and I'll show you today what I experienced. So why a detective? You saw it in the title of this session. I started working at Salta Group, one of the largest educators in Europe, about 8 years ago, as being responsible for learning innovation. And being a very traditional company, I noticed early on that I was kind of the only one who had a bit of an understanding how online learning worked. So I got named Chief of Innovation in that sense and got to bring us to the new age. It was a great experience, but it took me 8 years to get where I am right now. And one of the things I immediately noticed was I'm not really a big scientist. So I knew there's a lot of stuff going on in online learning, but there's not that much great research on the topic yet. So I started off doing some research, and I noticed early on that's not my cup of tea. We did a research on VR. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. Seeing what results could be of VR for learning. And it took us about 7 years to get that research published. It was awesome, but at the moment of publishing the research, we're all very happy, but the devices we used and all the abilities we had at the moment were not available anymore. Like they were all outdated. So yeah, I felt this is not the type of research I need to be doing because this is not valuable for the field. So I started doing really practical research, and having about 300,000 learners in physical classrooms every year, I had a great opportunity to try out a lot. I moved them to online and experienced quite a lot. As Andy mentioned, I wrote a book about it. It's going to be published in about a month, and it's going to be called The Old-Fashioned Future of Education, and that's because it's a plea for old-fashioned good quality and great use of technology. And today, I'll pick out 6 small stories I want to tell you, maybe 8. I squeezed in 2 more, and we'll see if we get there. But I picked out 6 stories, and those stories, in all those stories, was a telltale sign that there's a different way than I was expecting to engage learners in learning. So I'll run through them, one each. We'll have a brief discussion about every subject and hope to learn a bit from you guys as well. So the first one, their number 1 downloaded app that no one has. And this is a story from about 2012, when I experienced a lot of trouble in the start of my career with spelling correctly. I'm from the generation who in the Netherlands did not have great education on spelling, so I made a lot of mistakes. And professionally, that turned into an embarrassment usually. So I was not all that open about it. What I tended to do in Dutch, there's a lot going on around using a D or a T at the end of a sentence. Doesn't make sense to you guys, doesn't really matter, but it's quite a tricky thing to remember. There are fairly simple rules for that, but I just didn't learn them really well in school. So what I used to do is, when I was in doubt, rewrite the whole sentence, get rid of it, and start over again. Very inefficient. And at that time I was working in a training agency, and we did a lot of writing skills training. So I asked my colleague, on a moment of bravery, I asked my colleague, can you help me out? Can you explain me how these D's and T's work? And his colleague started laughing. So he said, Tom, you have to be kidding me. You can't be struggling with D's and T's in this path in your career. Like, you're well educated, and you don't know this. And, well, as you can imagine, that did something with my confidence in that area. So I walked away, and embarrassment grew, and I spoke less and less about it. Until I heard a colleague of me, who was in the room next to it, heard the conversation. And he said, well, to be honest, I've got the same problem. So we spoke to another trainer on writing skills, and she said, oh, well, this is easily fixed. And she took us in, we took a brief course, and we learned, I think in an hour or something, how this works, and prevented us from making any spelling mistakes in the future. Though it's in English, there won't be any mistakes. In Dutch, I'm still a bit wary of it, but well. What we decided to do is we had a discussion with a few more colleagues, and we noticed if you ask people, there's much more going on. There's a lot of embarrassment specifically about around this theme, and people did not express that they have this problem. So what we did is we built an app, a very, very simple app. And that app explained the rules, so you could just follow a fairly simple scheme and help yourself learn the scheme of when to use D, T, or DT. Super easy. We built it in a few weeks, and it was launched in the Netherlands. And, well, as the title says, it became number 1 in the educational apps within a month. So it was the number 1 most downloaded app in the Android store and in the iOS store, in the Apple store. And it was in the top 10 most downloaded apps overall for quite a while. So it was fairly odd because no one seemed to have that problem, and it was a very popular app. So you can imagine at that moment I was quite stunned. Like, it's very much used, but we had no clue what was going on. And so this really learned me there's so much more going on we don't see. L&D, well, I hope all people who are here today involved in L&D are not the typical training people from 10 years ago, running training when you're asked to, at least ask some questions like, why do you want the course, etc. But I think still in this day and age there's a lot of space to be able to engage people in opening up possibilities, avoiding command and control structures, or avoiding people having to take the confrontation. A topic on which we experience this quite a lot is on assertiveness. So people needing to ask their boss for a course on assertiveness, which costs £2,000 or £1,000 or whatever, is actually the challenge of that person. So if they ask it, they probably pass the course, right? So yeah, that's a very tricky thing. And there's a lot of subjects which we tend to miss, in which what we call sneaky learning is very important. So structuring your learning processes, we noticed just enabling people, showing them the place, and then allowing them to take any course will engage a lot more people than you might expect. And you just might end up figuring out that a topic is much bigger than you were expecting. So what I wanted to ask you guys, and I'd hope to hear one or two things back from you guys as well, is how do you accommodate for sneaky learning? Like how do you facilitate that in your company? Is there a lot of space for it? Is the culture right? Are you enabling it? Are the processes structured in a way that, at least for some topics, sneaky learning is possible? And so maybe you can have like a 30-second to a minute discussion with your colleagues on the table, and then we'll pick up some insights. Okay, so let's gather some insights. Andy, it's Sharon, right? Yeah. So is there anyone happy to share what they discussed, or a great way to facilitate in sneaky learning? It's a lot of people there. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying that we
Oh, you can take the mic if you want. Yeah.
We launched development days for the first time in our organisation this year. So people book up to 10 days a calendar year in the same way you book annual leave.
Okay.
And if there's anything that's sort of considered mandatory or compliance training, that's not part of that.
Ah, okay,
So
good.
it allows you, as long as it's relatively job related, it allows you to explore what you would like to.
Awesome.
And, allows that time.
Yeah. Oh, great example. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Someone else, maybe one or two more people? I'd love to hear. Yeah, there in the back. Yeah, there you go. That's better.
Thank you. Not intended to be an advert, but because of the nature of my organisation, the fact that our training is very specialist, for all the things that are slightly more generic, we went the LinkedIn Learning route, which just gives people an open account. And we've not had it long, so I can't tell you any brilliant insights about what people are going and sneakily learning, but I'm guessing there will be some very soon.
Okay, thanks. Nice. Yeah, one more? Or we're good? Sure. Let's move to the next story. So, sneaky learning was one of the early finds in this process of my experiences. And then there's this second subject, which kind of surprised me. So we were working on starting up online learning, and as I mentioned, it's a very classroom-focused business I used to be in. So I was kind of the only one with about 1,000 employees at that moment who was really into online learning. So we started developing a course catalog, like a library of online learning, which was sold under a subscription model. And in the early stages of that process, trying if that would be a good model for us and if it would be valuable for the market, I did an experiment with 1,000 people, giving them access, free access to the platform in a trade-off for feedback. So, as you guys can imagine, that was the worst time of my life, because if you ask people, especially people interested in learning and development for feedback, there's a lot going to come your ways. I noticed, especially on the area of e-learning, a lot of people are convinced about their own opinions. So I thought, I don't really care, I just want to take in everything I can learn. And the tricky part was actually developing those courses, and specifically one course, the mindfulness course. And I think at this moment, you guys, with apps like Calm and Headspace and that kind of thing, you can imagine online learning for mindfulness is not that exciting. At that moment, I could not find anyone who wanted to develop the course, like anyone who was an expert in mindfulness, because they said mindfulness can't be learned online. So I spent, I think, a month or two finding someone, and then we took some courses ourselves and created a simple course on mindfulness. And there was this one lady who was taking this course. So she was in the 1,000 people who were experiencing the platform and giving us feedback. I followed them personally, so I also asked them, like, if you have any feedback, send it to me personally. And this lady emailed me in the second day, yeah, your model is very frustrating, and I really don't like it. And that was because I learned from theory and a lot of neuroscience in practice, I learned you should space out learning, right? So we build really small blocks of learning and pushed people to daily learning. So all blocks were 5, maybe 10 minutes, especially on the mindfulness front. That seemed to us that could really work well. But what we did was we put locks on the next activity. So we actually pushed people into learning daily. And this led to a lot of frustration. And I'll get to that in a bit, but this specific lady, she was super frustrated because it took a lot of time. And she said, yeah, well, I've got stress now. I remember the email as it was yesterday. She said, like, yeah, I've got stress now, and that's why I'm taking the mindfulness course. But you're very much frustrating me because I can't continue. I need to finish the course right now so that I can be mindful. Yeah, everyone I tell this story laughs. But then she really sent it to me, and she's not unique, I found out later on. So she was super frustrated. And then I noticed when she progressed, she started sending milder and milder emails to me expressing that she was experiencing calming down. And after a week, maybe 2 weeks, she sent me an email, like a reflective email that she got the point, right? So that she was in a mindfulness course. And she said, I was super frustrated at the start, but that was actually your goal, right? To convince me to continue. And I said, well, it wasn't my goal to convince you to continue, but you did yourself. And for me, starting like from a very much a classroom-driven business, starting online learning in this area, I wasn't totally convinced about my own solutions. I just built something which I thought might work. And seeing the expressions of this lady and much more employees or people which were in the first 1,000 learned me what we were doing might actually just make sense and might actually be better than classroom learning because you get to spend a lot more time with people. So I noticed in this model that if we space out learning, the effect is not only that you remember it better because you've got like small chunks, but it's also that you can put things into practice fairly easily and put people in frustrating situations or help people gain insights over a longer period of time because they commit to spending time on a subject 4 to 6 weeks long in our case. I'd much rather have it longer, by the way. We noticed that the gains in terms of knowledge and practice are much better at 8 weeks, but it's very tricky to keep people engaged in e-learning for 8 weeks. So we finish off at 6, try to push them to continue themselves after that. So this lady very much learned me, even though mindfulness was the first topic, or maybe the last topic, which anyone would think of to do online at that moment. It worked much better than the knowledge-driven classroom courses, which are generally converted to e-learning. And still, I notice this. Like, if I ask people the purpose of e-learning, it's usually knowledge transfer and save some time in the classroom. Still, that's really not the case. You can actually create behavioral change if you look at it in this way. So, what would you say are the boundaries of online learning? I'll have you have a quick 30-second to a minute discussion again and discuss, like, so where do you guys think we can go with online learning? Is it this mindfulness course the most successful example, or can we go even further into, well, for example, from behavioral change to attitude change or anything? Just have a brief discussion and we'll get some insights. Okay, let's see what we can gather. I'd love to have just 2-3 responses from anyone who's happy to share about the boundaries you guys found. So please raise your hand and Sharon will walk over to you to take the mic. Yeah, gentleman in the middle.
Are we saying like the culture? So you want them to engage outside their direct business to go online, but if the company's culture is we're going to really force you and they resist, or we're not going to force you so I don't do it, where that middle line is.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, nice, thank you. Culture can be a great blocking issue for sneaky learning as well, right? Yeah.
I mean, we were thinking about actually there's in reality no boundaries. It could go anywhere, but it's about skill, ability, time, and budget. Those are the things that hold you inside the boundaries.
Right.
So we were sort of mentioning things like virtual reality, things like surgery simulators, airplane simulators, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Of things that you wouldn't think you could do electronically, but actually they're already there.
Right. Nice. No boundaries. Sounds good, right? Yeah. Okay. Who else? Maybe last one.
If you want to talk about. No, we were just saying as well that you don't have boundaries, I guess, if you want to talk about operations and stuff. But when it gets more to like soft skills or like social skills, like we were talking about being assertive, for example, it's great because you can teach people the theory, but actually putting it in practice is not something you can do through an e-learning because you have to have another person to reflect to.
Yeah, makes sense. You can cause, like in this example, you can cause the behavior, right? So you can help people convince themselves to start approaching people and start trying stuff. But yeah, you need another person. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's yeah. Do you want to add something?
Maybe I can say without microphone.
Yeah.
When it comes to blue-collar employees.
Blue-collar employees.
They need to know how to use the machines. So it's like you can't apply e-learning on the operational education.
Yeah, like if it's about using any machine.
Using
or
the machine, or
machine.
troubleshooting or anything like this.
Yeah. But it's the same in classroom, right?
No, in our case, classroom, it's actually the factory floor.
You would then have the machine.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. We actually did some experiments in this sense with having people just learn from a screen. Like, so the big difference I see between traditional e-learning and the way I think of it, which practically has no difference, though, like it's more a conceptual difference, is that we take it to the workplace. So in mindfulness, for example, when you open our course, you're convinced to go to a place where you sit outside or anywhere in the grass or whatever, a spot which is fine for doing mindfulness. So anything you would have done in a classroom training or whatever as well. So we actually did some experiments with having people work with certain machines, in this case boat engines, for example, needing to work on them, teach them how to, like in very brief snippets of content on their phone, and then applying it themselves into practice without guidance. It's scary, be careful. Like, don't do that with every machine, but there are possibilities to cross that boundary. But I do agree that it's a tricky one, especially when you need physical stuff. Okay, let's pick up the next subject because it's very much in line with the story I just told you guys. So, as I mentioned, a lot of the learners got frustrated by the model which we used, which induced daily learning. Like it was actually enforced. So you couldn't go faster, you couldn't go slower. And we had these 1,000 people in the platform taking all our courses. Could be soft skills, could be, I don't know, Excel or whatever, leadership, anything. And we noticed across all subjects, there were two common things. All learners were frustrated. I think without a single exception. So we noticed everyone we asked about how the experience was thought it was a terrible experience. Very frustrating that I can't go slower. I missed today, so now I lost track. The other said like, yeah, I wanted to speed up. I've got time to learn now. Why can't I go faster? And there was a lot of frustration across everyone. But the second thing we noticed was that the knowledge gain was overall better. So we noticed all those frustrated people, or let's say a significant group of those frustrated people, had a better retention after a day of learning and after a week of learning. So we were torn at that moment because we then needed to figure out like what to do. Our model was causing better learning results, but also a lot of frustration. So it learned me it's not necessarily the best way to engage people when you push in the best method of learning. And then what do you do? So that's my question to you. I'll tell you in a bit what I did, but first I'd love to have you discuss this again, 30 seconds or anything. What would you do knowing you frustrate people and you help them gain new skills? Or knowledge in this case, by the way. Yeah, let's go. Okay, let's continue. Who's happy to share what you would do? Please show of hands if who wants to tell us what to do. Yeah, the lady in the back in the green.
Thank you. Hi there. Yeah, we were saying that we would share why we're doing it and what we expect to see as the results. Because if they understand why, then potentially they'll be more bought in early on.
Thank you. Someone with a different approach, yeah. Go ahead.
So we were talking about focusing on the success. So rather than letting them dwell on the frustration, getting them to really think about, but what can you now do that you couldn't do before? Because if they remember that, then the frustration hopefully dissipates. Yeah.
So actually change their perception on the same situation without changing it. Nice, yeah. I should have done that. Someone else? Man in front here, yes.
We said the similar thing about explaining why, but we also sort of distinguish between desirable and undesirable difficulty, and in your case it's kind of, there's a very clear reason why the frustration arises. In other cases the frustration might arise for other reasons that aren't necessarily helping the education, and so you want to explain the former and eliminate the latter maybe, or somehow excuse the latter.
Yeah, nice, yeah. We actually also looked at the theory of Bjork on desirable difficulties. Actually got me going on the approach we took here. So we did two things. We initially moved out of the very strict method. So we unlocked all activities and allowed for people to move a little bit faster and a little bit slower. And we started to change the copy of everything we expressed to them a lot, trying to convince them that this is a desirable difficulty to have, like that it's a good thing because they gain more from it. That did something. And the other was just to create a much more motivational approach and try to motivate people by explaining them how this method works and what it brings. Try to motivate them to stick to the pattern. So we noticed people started to drift off in terms of strategies quite a lot. So we still see a lot of people who take the, well, as we call it, the foie gras method. So stuffing all knowledge in a day means retention on the second day is quite well, right? You take your French test in school and then walking out you don't remember anything, but you did pass the test. So yeah, we still see that behavior, and we try to convince them by sending them little compliments, motivators, and a little bit of explanation how this process of learning works. And that led to a decrease in knowledge retention, but for me it was like an acceptable decrease, because it wasn't really extreme, but I felt like we should do this to keep engagement high, to have people be able to stick to the learning, not frustrate them that much, but help them still to gain as much knowledge as they can. So that's kind of the approach we took there. And it's still under construction, so it means we do a lot of data analysis on how people move through our courses and try to improve the way we speak to the person. Use a lot of growth mindset approach in the text, for example. That helps. So yeah, still under construction. So the next story I want to share with you guys is the one around the learning FOMO. Have you guys heard about the learning FOMO? So a few years ago we did a research on adaptive learning. Everyone might be familiar with the topic, right? And what we wanted to figure out is whether adaptive learning leads to more knowledge intake. So we built some compliancy courses. We actually own them, so we changed them a little bit and started using them. We did an experiment with about 500 people running through that course, offering them different types of adaptability. Actually, we were researching whether or not it was valid to start using adaptability in terms of learning strategy. So offering people more audio-focused courses, for example, when we know that that is their preference, their preferred learning strategy, or a more visual-driven course, for example. But what we actually found was something entirely different. There are some insights on that as well, but what we found was very different. We found that it created a learning FOMO. So especially the knowledge-based adaptive learning, so where you take a quick test at the start, and then based on the results of that test, you get a compiled course. So if you pass certain learning objectives already in the test, you don't get them served in the course itself. And especially in compliancy, I haven't done this for soft skills training, for example, so I can't validate that's the case there, but especially in compliancy, that led to a lot of discomfort. It saved a lot of people time, but we noticed, well, we introduced the FOMO because a lot of people expressed in that research, doing some qualitative interviews, that they were very much stressed about the content which they did not see, because they then after that needed to take like a big test, an official test at an exam location, and they did not feel comfortable that like we were actually qualifying them in the right way and skipped the right content for them. So because we didn't actually allow them to jump back into that content, we just skipped it entirely. So we created a lot of nervous people and actually introduced the learning FOMO because yeah, people want to know what they missed. So this is again related to the insight I expressed before. I thought I was helping people achieve better results, but I created a different problem while doing so. And yeah, that's why we started moving to a new model where we have people see the content which was supposed to be available, so they can freely run through that. It's a fairly simple solution, obviously. But we also started telling them, like, we tried convincing them to take the test anyways. And the people who we convinced passed the test. I think it was 90 to 95% of a pass grade on this fairly tough subject. So we did quite well on that end, saved people I think about 4 or 5 hours of studying, so that's not bad. I think there's a few 100,000 people who need to take this course in the Netherlands every year. So, well, if everyone would take that course, it would save a lot of time for the business. But it was mostly just about then convincing people that it was a good idea to skip. And, well, allowing them to skip back, we noticed people don't do it. So that's the odd thing there. We enabled people to look back at the content which they did not get served, and they did not look at it. But the FOMO disappeared. So, allow people to see stuff, not necessarily needed, but it will help them feel more comfortable. Yeah, let's skip to the next one. The Tale of the Forbidden Course. So, this is actually not too long ago, 3 years ago. We progressed with our platform and our library quite a lot. So we had an offering of about 500 courses, several languages, very nice. And I had this customer who had 20,000 employees. They opened up our platform, and we agreed we'll walk through the analytics every month. And so the third month, we ran through it. They noticed the #1 most followed course by a long distance was an introduction in Spanish language. And for the Dutch, that's very irrelevant because there's not too much cases in which you need to speak Spanish, except for when you go on holiday to Spain. So I spoke to that customer and they told me, I want you to remove that course. And I asked them, why do you want me to remove that course? And they said, well, it's super popular, but it's irrelevant for work. So you need to take it out. And yeah, we did not. It got even worse because in the top 10 were 3 to 4 courses which were irrelevant for the workplace. And before we took them out, I did a quick analysis of what happened in the platform. And what I noticed is something you guys might all know, but I didn't. Learning causes learning. So we noticed all people who took that Spanish course tended to take another course, which was then a different course. That's why they did not turn up in the top 10. So it was very much more differentiated, but they all of them took a second course, and a lot of them took a third course, as opposed to a lot of other people who took Excel, for example, PowerPoint, or some other business topic. Significantly less, though it's not like no one, but significantly less people took the time to take a second course. So we did some qualitative interviews to figure out what was going on there, and we noticed a very simple thing. Learning causes learning, and it was super practical. What people expressed to us is, well, yeah, I got a hold of the platform. I did it because I want to go on holiday to Spain and just want to freshen up my Spanish or learn a few words so I can order a bread at the bakery. And what obviously happened is that they saw the platform and they saw more content. And because it was a fun topic they were taking, and a topic which they had a general motivation to be taking, caused them to have a good experience with the platform and with the content, learn to use the methodology, learn to appreciate it, and then take a second course because they felt comfortable with the method and the approach. So that made a big difference. And so we convinced the customer, and it happened at a lot of customers after this customer, but we convinced them to keep the courses in and actually start using this concept much more. So what they now do is they now, every once in a while, offer courses which are not completely relevant, also in classroom setting, for example, to the employees to get them a little bit of an appetite to learning. So I'd love to take 30 more seconds and have you guys have a quick chat, and then specifically about how to create that learning appetite. So this is a great example how to create that appetite, offering people a course which they like. So how do you guys do that? Please have a quick chat, and we'll bring up some insights. Okay, so let's grab some. Oh yeah, we're going to try the other microphone again. Does it work well? Did you guys all hear me? Are you good? Yeah? Yeah, so who's happy to share their insights? Who's happy to share how to create learning appetites? Over there. Take the digital. Yeah, there you
go. So we offer people money that they can use sort of as they see fit. So there's very few restrictions placed on it. So it can be anywhere from sort of a couple of hundred, and then as they progress through their career, up to a few £1,000s. And it also ties into sort of other mandatory stuff which they'll gain throughout their career. So, like you said earlier, it sort of just provides a little reminder for them to do a course and then gets them tied into learning and sort of gets them in the right mindset. So that's sort of what we do.
So, nice. Does it have to be learning related, or can they do just anything?
It's very broad.
Buy a lawnmower or anything?
Yeah. So nice. Bigger sums of money, you have to have accredited
right.
sort of outcomes for it, but smaller sums, you could do virtually anything.
Cool. Yeah. Very nice example. Thank you. Someone else? Okay. A lot of creating appetite going on, I see. Yeah, so that's not too inconvenient, because I would love to squeeze in 2 more examples if I can. We should be fine. So the tale of the failing advice. It was experiment we did in 2017. It was the first recommendation engine I built. Whoever built a recommendation engine in their lives themselves? Oh, there's someone. You're my friend now. Yeah, so it was a big mistake. Was obviously doing it myself, but I worked with a team on a website which is called opleiding.nl. It's a very Dutch name, but it's a catalog with all classroom courses offered over the country. You can easily search. It's like booking.com. Since it has so much courses in there, we wanted to offer relevant courses and help people search through it, because if you don't help people find something, they can't be engaged in it either way. So at that time, LinkedIn was not bought by Microsoft yet, so they had a very open API, so we could take a lot of data from that. So we allowed people to sign in with LinkedIn, and we subtracted their profile. They, unfortunately, they already locked the education field in LinkedIn, so I couldn't subtract which courses someone took or which education someone had, but I could fetch the title of someone, a job title, and a summary. And so we did, with NLP, natural language processing, we did an analysis of that text and combined it with some other stuff, and then created a recommendation for that person. And so what we noticed, not too early, unfortunately, that everyone, without an exception, got at least one course advised, which was related to dietary subjects. So it was all about food and health and that kind of stuff. So we were really troubled figuring out what happened here. And so we searched through the data, and since we used natural language processing and then pushed it into a machine learning algorithm, it's very tricky to figure out what happened, because it adds weights to certain important words in the text, for example, but you couldn't figure out which words. So it was a very manual process. Like it's very nice to use the machines, and I'm a big believer of the use of AI, and we've got a lot of great cases running now, which are very successful. But this really puzzled us, because it's a black box in which we put something in. So I think I spent 2, maybe 3 weeks figuring out what was going on. And then we noticed something fairly simple. So if you have a job title in LinkedIn, it always says, I'm Tom, I'm the CEO at Skillstown, right? So what we did not know is that it actually took the word at, and it pulled it out, and it was in the job title, so it was one of the most important, it was graded as one of the most important fields. We figured this out because someone flipped the language of the analysis, because we use it in Dutch and we set it to English, and no one got the dietary advice. In Dutch, at is the past tense of eating. So you can imagine this took us ages to figure out, and only found it out manually that this was the problem. So this learned me many things, but it learned me cleaning up your data is super important. And it's also mega important to figure out what to do with AI and have a good understanding of where you should use yourselves and very, very practical insight to get good advice. And so there's one more thing we noticed, because we pushed in this advice and we then got excluded from the LinkedIn integration because Microsoft bought it. So they said, okay, now no one can access the data anymore, which is understandable, obviously. Me as a user, I'm not too unhappy about that, to be honest. But so we couldn't use that data anymore. So we created a wizard asking you for information. We asked you 4 questions and created a great advice based on that input. We didn't ask you like what type of course do you want to take, that was too obvious. So we asked you like what did you do in the past, for example, and created an advice based on that. And so then it was super precise. Like we referenced it, but with a lot of manual labor. So we had a lot of people look at the advice for certain people. So a computer scientist with experience X got recommendation Y, and we noticed like the accuracy is 95% up. So a lot of people appreciated the advice. But no one did anything with it when we launched it, and everyone was actually dissatisfied with the advice. So we knew from our experiments this must be the right advice. No one did anything with it. You know what happened? Again, super simple. Usually it turned out just 2, maybe if we're lucky, 3 courses. Because the advice was so precise, we offered very little choices. And we noticed people need choice. Because it disengaged them a lot that they did not have the choices. So what we did, we added random advice. We just picked other courses randomly with no logic, not relevant to you, and added 5 more to get to an average of 7 recommendations. All picked out the one we thought was the best advice, all of them. And we then got people going because they started booking the actual courses, which they did not book when they got just one advice. So yeah, what I really learned from that is that when you open up this type of recommendation and try to get really precise with people, it's not needed. You should be offering people a lot more choices so that they feel free. And I think you're seeing a trend in my story, maybe. And this is all up to me and my personality, obviously, but I'm very much motivated to do the best thing I can for anyone, help them improve their results, help them learn quite a lot. But notice there's much more nuance needed to create great engagement. And so I want to run through one more example, because I told you guys in the beginning I did a research on VR. And this is actually a very different story, because I noticed here why VR still might be a big promise in the future. And the telltale was very clear. So in 2014, we built an application which allowed you to train your presentation skills. So unfortunately for you guys, you're the subject of my training today, and me getting used to presenting for this group. But many people, obviously, who want to start to get into good presentations don't get the chance to speak to big public. So we created a room in VR and allowing people to present for groups like this, small groups, maybe big theaters, even stadiums full of people. You could choose yourselves, and we would analyze your behavior. With the Microsoft Kinect camera, we registered like your movements, we registered your audio, intonation, anything about you. With the VR goggles, we could track where you were looking. So we created an interaction with the fake people in the audience falling asleep, for example, if you don't look at them all that often, so that you learn to make contact with everyone in the room for a bit, and then they all wake up again. And that's a very simple way to train engagement. But But the problem was, at that time, it was like the first development kit Oculus at that moment had supplied. It was fairly ugly. Did anyone try like the DK1 Oculus Rift? Yeah, did you? It was a good experience to see what was possible, but it was fairly ugly still. And so the people we had in the room were not at all realistic. They were very much, there was no anti-aliasing or anything, so it was quite square people. You could easily get distracted by that, so all my peers convinced me like, yeah, this is not going to work, especially the trainers. You need to have people in a realistic situation. So then we did a lot of experiments with groups, and then there was this one moment I listened in. So I used to go out of the room when the experiment was done, so someone would get a presentation assignment. I would go out of the room, there was no one in the room, just that person presenting. And I listened into the audio afterwards. And I heard stuttering. So I heard this person was actually stuttering when doing a presentation for a random fake group, which they were aware is fake, was super ugly, unrealistic, and then still they were stuttering. So we tracked this over a lot more presentations, and people struggling with presentation skills tend to show this behavior. Skipping words, getting stuck in the presentation, starting over. A lot of the telltale traits you would see in a normal presentation training or in my presentation. If you guys look at me, if someone's nervous, you see that in their behavior, and we noticed that was the same in the VR situation, though being very unrealistic. And so we almost stopped the experiment because we thought we did not get to a realistic enough situation. The investments we needed to do at that moment to even get there were quite high. And as the lady in the back expressed earlier on, budget is a thing there. So also for us, there was a go, no go moment. And we said, well, let's push just a minute more and see if we can get people engaged in a short experiment. And I'm very happy we did so, because we noticed the solution, although ugly, really had big impact and actually engaged learners much more than we were expecting. So if anyone here wrote off VR because it's pricey and because it's a lot of work, or it's the ever promised future, can be used today. Devices are much cheaper, production is much cheaper. Save on quality and you're fine. I would say create ugly stuff. If people are motivated, if you're in the right area, if you pick the right subject, you'll see people will get to results. And then Andy is making this nasty gesture to me that I really should stop. So I just wanted to show you guys, again, I'll publish a book which contains, I think, 20 more stories around the experiments which we did and the stuff we found. Got a lot of research punched in, but I'm not a researcher at all, just an experience-driven guy who wants to figure out what works and then scale it up and see if it still works, and then scale it up and see if it still works. So if any one of you heard a story today and can disprove what I told, or can take the opposite conclusions, please come to me and share those results, because I'd love to change the things I found right now. I'm not going to rewrite the book though. I'm happy if it's finished. But yeah, I'm very much, I'll be the first one to acknowledge that I was not right. Thank you guys so much for spending your time listening to my story.